What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. With the upcoming release of the Hitman's Bodyguard's Wife, I wanted to do something a little different. So today we're going to talk about my 15 favorite movies starring or featuring Samuel L. Jackson. I did a couple of these actor-centered videos when I first started my channel, and it seemed like they did well enough, so I figured to give them a shot again. Hopefully it can be a recurring thing as a way of being able to discuss more films on here without necessarily everything being an individual review, and hopefully I'll be able to dive into some hidden gems for some of these lists and offer you some new movies to put on your watch list. Now for this video and any others that are like this, the way this works is that these aren't the best Samuel L. Jackson performances of all time. These are based more on the movies themselves as long as they have Samuel L. Jackson in a prominent role. So I might rank a movie higher on here because I liked it as a whole more, but maybe he gave a better performance in something a little lower, if that makes sense. I know there may be some confusion there, so I wanted to clear that up. And while Jackson's been in over 100 movies with his roles always varying, this is strictly for movies where he's either leading it or he's in a major supporting role. He's had cameos in a lot of movies over the years. He started his career off with one-off roles in big movies like True Romance and Goodfellas, but as much as I liked movies like those, I'm not counting them for here because he comes and goes in the blink of an eye, and it's not fair to leave out movies where he's a lot more prominent in favor of those. So that means I'm also not counting every single one of his Marvel appearances where he just shows up for like one scene. It's only going to be the ones where he plays a fairly substantial part, even if the movie's great. Like, as much as I like Avengers Endgame, for example, he's in it with a non-speaking role for like 10 seconds. So I'm only looking at the ones where his name is in the main credits somewhere. So let me know in the comments your favorite Samuel L. Jackson movies. As always, this is just my list, not a definitive ranking. And make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these videos, as it helps me out immensely by getting my channel out there. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more movie-related content on a near daily basis. But now, let's get to the list. At number 15 is Fresh, a coming-of-age drama that received critical acclaim when it was released in 1994, even making several Best of the Year lists that included Roger Ebert's, but then seemingly dropped off the face of the earth not too long after. Which is a shame because it's a gripping, emotional little film that mixes moments of deep contemplation in between sequences of shocking, brutal violence, as this young drug dealer, played by Sean Nelson, thinks over his life as he finds a way to pit his ruthless employers, including a young Giancarlo Esposito, against one another. Released a month before his star-making turn in Pulp Fiction, Jackson has a somewhat small but extremely pivotal role as Fresh's father, who's only seen in these recurring chess sequences in a park that seem disconnected from the main events, though they actually see him using the game to teach his son some life lessons, and they wind up allowing the wheels in Fresh's mind to turn, and he uses those lessons to help him when going up against his employers. The film initially put me off a bit because Fresh is a very hardened, almost emotionless character for much of the film, but once you get to the end, without spoiling anything, there is actually a nice little payoff as far as his emotional journey goes, and the film manages to be powerful without resorting to flashy melodrama. It's not an easy watch, especially with one scene involving a dog that I thought was crossing the line, but it's otherwise a solid hidden gem to check out.
Well, he is your friend, boy. They all are. But you're going to have to use him just like you use the other. If he falls by the wayside, well, that's just life's little game, ain't it? And until you come ready to play a game, you'll never beat her at it.
At number 14 is Kong Skull Island, which I already did a full review for on here, so I'll keep this a bit short. But this one's a lot of fun, and it's a movie that I feel gets a little unfairly criticized. I'm not saying it's the absolute best adaptation of King Kong out there, but it's a great film that manages to keep some of the crucial Kong story elements, but still do something different. In addition to Jackson, the film has an all-star cast that includes Tom Hiddleston, Brie Larson, John Goodman, and John C. Reilly, among others. And while not everyone's utilized as best as they could have been, they all have a lot of fun with their roles, and are accompanied by some really fast-paced, nerve-shattering action scenes. In addition to John C. Reilly, Jackson is by far one of the big highlights here from the cast, playing an army colonel whose men die at the hands of Kong almost as soon as they arrive on the island, which leads him to get obsessed with revenge, in the vein of Moby Dick's Captain Ahab. Blending revenge, humor, and plenty of thrills, this is easily one of the best entries in the cinematic universe now known as the Monsterverse.
Well, if you look at that, it bleeds.
At number 13 is Unbreakable, a dark and gritty superhero film that deconstructed the genre before it became popular to do so. While its somber tone doesn't always make it the easiest watch, it is a deeply emotional film that shows M. Night Shyamalan at arguably his most polished and sophisticated, even if his signature twist ending doesn't completely stick the landing. At the heart of it, though, are two knockout performances. This is a rare instance of Jackson being a bit more restrained here as Elijah Price, despite being a madman obsessed with the superhero lore. And despite him being known more for his scene-chewing performances, this shows he can be just as good when he scales things back. Though it's Bruce Willis who absolutely crushes it here in his struggle to not only figure out who he is, but also keep his family together as they go through troubles of their own. It's a well-done character study that's deeply contemplative in nature, and it remains one of Shyamalan's best works.
I believe comics are our last link to an ancient way of passing on history. The Egyptians drew on walls. Countries all over the world still pass on knowledge through pictorial forms. I believe comics are a form of history.
At number 12 is Eve's Bayou, a 1960s set family drama that dips its toes into voodoo, curses, and spirits, with a nice early starring role for Journey Smollett as the title character. Jackson serves as a producer here and also stars as Eve's father Lewis, who has a very friendly, charismatic demeanor on the outside that allows Jackson to be in his element, but this character also has a whole other side to him that Eve is just aching to expose, which is the source of tension driving this whole film. While it ventures into very dark territory, including a plot revelation later on that had me almost squirming in my seat, there is still something of an odd charm to it, as the entire cast making up the family just works so well off one another. And whenever there is something resembling a functioning family dynamic, it's quite enjoyable to see, with a major standout being Debbie Morgan as Eve's Aunt Moselle. And that chemistry is so rock solid that, as things reach their boiling point, it crescendos into something absolutely mesmerizing and heartbreaking. Now, it does have some tonal shifts that may throw you off a bit, but the end result is an electrifying drama that will resonate with you deeply.
You love Mama?
Your mama is the most beautiful, perfect woman I ever met.
At number 11 is Jackie Brown. Probably one of the lesser-known entries in Quentin Tarantino's filmography, this admittedly does stick out like a sore thumb, as it's the only film of his to be based on pre-existing material, which is the novel Rum Punch by Elmore Leonard, whose style was dialogue-heavy, but considerably more grounded than Tarantino's. So while he managed to inject his own style in here where he could, he did follow the source material pretty closely, with slightly less opportunities to include some of the flair he's known for. But I still maintain it's a really enjoyable film. It acts as a loving tribute to blaxploitation films, while also replicating the style and maintaining the aesthetic of a 1970s film in general, which will be a lot of fun for fans of older films. And while it does take some time to get things moving, there is a slick caper hidden underneath, with a layered narrative featuring character after character repeatedly double-crossing one another. Plus, it does contain some of Tarantino's famous darkly humorous banter, particularly much of the dialogue surrounding Jackson as the antagonist Ordell Roby, along with his associates played by Robert De Niro and Bridget Fonda. And the film is also notable for revitalizing the careers of 70s stars Pam Grier and Robert Forster, both of whom are just an absolute joy to watch, with Forster giving off a nice sense of warmth, while Grier just oozing charisma. While this isn't a movie one may immediately think of when Tarantino or most of these actors come to mind, I still say seek it out and give it a shot, as there's plenty to appreciate. And fun fact, Jackson has said Ordell Roby was one of his favorite roles to play, and I gotta say, this really is one of his best performances.
She trying to play your ass against me, ain't she?
Yeah,
See, I knew it.
At number 10 is The Incredibles. I think I finally came around to this one a bit more, because I almost wasn't even going to include it, as I never loved it the way so many others did. But I gave it another shot recently, and I had a much more enjoyable experience with it this time around. While I know younger audiences can't appreciate this, as a lot of kids my age at the time of its release really loved it, I think it's something that will resonate a bit more with you as an adult, mainly because you can sympathize a lot more with the plight of Bob Parr in particular, who's a character that's trying to avoid being stuck in a rut as he gets older and still keep his youth. And I think whenever it hones in on those themes, that's where the movie's strengths lie. though it's still got a lot of other enjoyable things about it, including fun action scenes, stylistic animation capturing the feel of the 1960s, and a nice sense of humor. It's not the funniest of Pixar's films by a long shot, but it did get me a few times, and Samuel L. Jackson as Frozone has by far the best lines with the supersuit scene. Only thing is, I was disappointed considering how much Frozone was marketed as being in the film, yet his screen time's considerably less than the movie lets on.
Honey!
What?
Where's my supersuit?
What?
Where is my supersuit?
At number 9 is The Banker. I already have a full review for this on my channel, so I'll keep this a bit short. But I actually enjoyed this one a lot, and it's a shame that this kind of slipped right under the radar. Though to be fair, it was released at the beginning of last year, just as the world began turning upside down. But this is a slick, really well-made drama from director George Nolfi about two black men in the 1950s, played by Jackson and Anthony Mackie, who get into the real estate game, but because of the racism they endure, they have to have a white man, played by Nicholas Hoult, be the face of their company to facilitate sales. It's a very dialogue-driven film, but one that relies on our three main characters always having to outsmart everyone they come across, and they always try to stay one step ahead, with a lot of the tension stemming from making sure Holt's character doesn't slip up while in a meeting. While it sounds like it could be a tad repetitive, I found it to be a really engrossing drama, especially thanks to just how charismatic both Mackie and especially the larger-than-life Jackson are here, and whenever they have a moment of victory, it feels so satisfying. Only thing with this one is that it's an Apple TV Plus exclusive, so that's the only way you can watch it, but if you have it, it's definitely worth a shot.
Let me tell you this. If one trip home can cripple your rational functions like this, we in trouble.
At number 8 is Incredibles 2. I know this might be considered sacrilege to say, but this actually clicked with me a lot more on the first time around than the first movie did. And even with more of an appreciation this time around for the first film, I still think it holds up even better than that did. And thankfully, as an aside, this time around Frozone does have a bit more of a role to play here than he did in the first. But this picks up directly where the first film left off and continues the same themes of trying to have purpose in your life. This time, Bob Odenkirk and Catherine Keener joined the cast as a wealthy businessman and his sister who use the Incredibles and Frozone as a way to make superheroes trustworthy again, only for a new supervillain to hijack those plans. The film managed to build on the original's charm and do what sequels are meant to do, and that's be grander in scale and upping the stakes. The plot's a bit more intricate, the ramifications feel more far-reaching, it's more action-packed, and it's actually a lot funnier than the original, including a great running joke involving the baby, Jack Jack. I had a lot of fun with this one, and while Pixar's sequel output's noted for being a bit hit and miss, this stands as one of those better entries.
So, you good then? You got everything under control, right? What the?
At number 7 is Hard 8, the first film by director Paul Thomas Anderson, which is probably one of his least seen projects. In fact, it's so off the radar these days that it doesn't even have a proper Blu-ray release in most countries. But you can actually view it on Amazon Prime as of this recording, and if you can, I can't recommend it enough. It stars Philip Baker Hall as a gambler who takes a young protege played by John C. Reilly under his wing, and things go great until they meet a young waitress played by Gwyneth Paltrow. And despite not being on all the posters, Jackson actually has a pivotal role as Riley's friend, coming into prominence later on in the film. It's a much more simplistic story than Anderson's later, more elaborate projects like Magnolia or There Will Be Blood, and it has a clear, low-budget aesthetic that just screams first feature film, as seen in a lot of independent 90s movies. But I gotta say, it's a pretty intense story, relying heavily on the performances of all four actors, who all absolutely knock it out of the park, balancing out gripping drama with some slight hints of dark comedy thanks to the fast-talking Jackson and the somewhat dim-witted Riley. Meanwhile, Hall absolutely commands the screen, walking a fine line between being open and friendly and being cold and calculating, while Paltrow turns in a great early performance herself, and they all keep you mesmerized for a good 100 minutes. This marked a great start for Anderson and is an excellent showcase for all four of these actors, and if you have Amazon Prime, definitely give this one a shot.
Says you remember, Jimmy. Friend lives up there?
I saw you playing crap over the original Doom. Bet the Hard 8 for 1,000 and you pressed it for 2. Stupid bet.
He thinks you don't like him.
I don't.
We now go from Hard 8 to The Hateful Eight at number 6, Tarantino's Western whodunit, which does channel some of the energy as Reservoir Dogs, with a group of people stuck in one room suspecting someone's not who they say they are. Now, despite some similarities between the two, this does have a personality all of its own. After a meticulously paced, dialogue-driven first half, which arguably does go on for a tad longer than it should have, this takes a turn to a very explosive second half, with Tarantino's usual mix of suspense-riddled conversations, hints of dark comedy, and spurts of over-the-top violence. Jackson leads this one and is as charismatic as ever, commanding the screen when in charge, as well as gleefully reciting Tarantino's colorful monologues, including one extremely explicit story halfway through when he learns more about one of the people staying at this cabin. Though the rest of this small cast is also fantastic, including the likes of Kurt Russell and Jennifer Jason Leigh, mixed with Tarantino regulars like Tim Roth and Michael Madsen. Now, there are multiple versions of this between the original theatrical cut, the Roadshow version, as well as the 4-part miniseries, and I'd say if you never saw this before, just stick with the original 168-minute version, which is long enough as it is. Some of the things added for the other versions do bring down the pacing just a bit, but while it's by no means close to my favorite Tarantino movie, more on that shortly, it's still another intense, exciting, and darkly hilarious entry in his filmography.
Did you know my son?
I know the day he died. Do you?
No.
You want to know what day that was?
Yes.
The day he met me.
At number 5 is Spider-Man Far From Home, another film on this list that got immensely better for me after a rewatch. I didn't find it the most rewarding experience on the first go, to be honest, considering it was the first Marvel film right after Avengers Endgame, and that was a hard act to follow. And considering it doesn't quite reach the same earth-shattering heights as Endgame, it comes off as a little disappointing in comparison, especially considering what the big turning point winds up being. But when you know what you're in for a second time around, you can appreciate it a lot more for what it is, which is a light, breezy mixture of a teen romantic comedy and an explosive action movie. Similar to the first Tom Holland Spider-Man film, this is incredibly funny, from the awkward romance between Peter and MJ, to the disjointed sort of mentor-trainee relationship Peter has with Nick Fury, who fills the void in this film that was left by Tony Stark in the previous Spider-Man film, but the fights are also something to behold here, including the absolutely surreal, disorienting fight scenes with Mysterio, whose bag of tricks gives us these highly elaborate, rapid-fire action scenes that are some of the most visually stunning fights in all of the MCU, in my opinion. Serving as a nice epilogue to the Infinity Saga, this is another great Spider-Man entry, and it closed out Marvel's Phase 3 on a high note.
So good to finally meet you. I saw you at the funeral, but I didn't think that was a good time to exchange numbers.
No, that would have been really inappropriate.
That's what I just said.
At number 4 is The Avengers. While Marvel's Infinity War and Endgame greatly expanded the scope as far as how large in scale a movie could be, there's also still something just so satisfying about seeing all these characters, most of whom were B-level heroes up until this point, meet and team up for the very first time. If you were to ask me if something like this was possible even 15 years ago, I would have said it would never happen, but here we are. I feel like there's only so much I can say about The Avengers that hasn't already been said, but it is just a really fun movie, from start to finish. And while Jackson's had his share of solid appearances in the MCU, this is probably one of the best uses of him as Nick Fury, especially going into the third act. Along with that, things like the banter among characters such as Tony Stark and Thor, to the visually stunning action scenes, to the emotional resonance of seeing these characters we grew to like over 5 other movies all come together, this still stands as one of Marvel's best films.
The idea was to bring together a group of remarkable people, see if they could become something more. See if they could work together when we needed them to fight the battles that we never could.
At number 3 is Django Unchained. A few months ago, I did a video called My Favorite Movie from Every Genre, and I almost was going to go with this as my favorite Western, and I didn't. Though it could have easily taken that spot, as this is one of my all-time favorite Quentin Tarantino movies. This is a pulpy, bloody, brutal action film, and while it's focused on a horrific period in American history, revenge is at the heart of this film's narrative. And that's what makes it so satisfying, as our 2 lead characters, played by Jamie Foxx and Christoph Waltz, infiltrate plantations, carrying out bounties, and trying to get the one-up on our villain Calvin Candy, played by Leonardo DiCaprio in what's easily his most scene-chewing performance to date, with Jackson in an equally outright vile role as his right-hand man, which I'd also describe as a scene-chewing performance. This film's mixed with all the usual Tarantino tropes, from its over-the-top violence to its conversation-driven moments of suspense, and while it's another film of his that's nearly 3 hours in length, you almost never feel it, making it a thoroughly engaging thriller and one of Tarantino's finest works.
And that will be the story of you, Django.
At number 2 is Jurassic Park, a film that I've talked about quite a few times on this channel already, so I'm going to keep this one pretty short, especially since Jackson's just in a supporting role here as the park's chief engineer. But having seen this growing up, this is one of the first movies to really wow me. It's a big blockbuster that isn't short on action, but also takes on a bigger meaning that's often overlooked to a degree. It's a film about possibilities, and the satisfaction of seeing those possibilities fulfilled, as seen when our characters first arrive at Jurassic Park. But it's also about the downside of getting too cocky with your ambitions, as seen with the dinosaurs getting loose. Now, on top of a simple yet effective story, the film just excels on every technical level possible, between the beautiful cinematography, top-notch sound mixing, and of course, John Williams' score and Steven Spielberg's direction. This is the definition of an iconic film, with so many quotable lines and memorable scenes, including the T-Rex breaking loose, Dennis Nedry stealing the dinosaur embryos, and the Velociraptor kitchen scene. I've seen it more times than I can count, and it never once gets old.
You didn't say the magic word.
Please! God damn it! I hate this hacker crap!
But at number 1 is Pulp Fiction. Now, I've only talked about this film briefly on this channel in one other video, but I will just reiterate that this is my favorite movie of all time. It's the film that got me to love and appreciate film the way I do now. Not because it's exactly the first film to do what it did necessarily, but because it was the first time I was exposed to a film that did something even remotely different, which was be a dialogue-driven movie where, if you think about it, not a whole lot happens outside of a few major dramatic beats, while also getting away with being told out of order and still having that feeling of being emotionally satisfying. While I've watched Jurassic Park more times than I can count, I can guarantee you I've watched Pulp Fiction even more than that. And Samuel L. Jackson's iconic performance is actually one of the big reasons why I love it so much. His intimidation scene at the beginning of the film is just one of my favorite scenes in a movie, period. While the diner standoff we see where his arc is actually fulfilled makes for one of the few somewhat positive moments in this film as a whole. Like all of Tarantino's other movies, it's as quotable as ever between the Royale with Cheese exchange, the Gold Watch story, Ving Rhames telling someone he's gonna get medieval on their ass, and so much more. At some point, I'll probably do a full in-depth review on Pulp Fiction and Tarantino's filmography as a whole, but for now, just know it has a special place for me in my film journey, and of course, it sits as my number 1 movie starring Samuel L. Jackson.
The truth is, you're the weak, and I am the tyranny of evil men. But I'm trying, Ringo. I'm trying real hard to be the shepherd.
And that's my ranking. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know there were a lot of really solid films I left out, but if I went through every single movie he's been in, we'd be here all day. But I hope to make this a recurring thing, every couple of weeks on a new actor, to go along with whatever big new release is out, as long as you guys liked it. So if you did, and you want to see more like this, then stay tuned. In the meantime, though, let me know, what are your favorite Samuel L. Jackson movies? Was anything I listed here? Was it something I left off? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone, and keep having fun with film.